it's been sort of like this, I don't know, work in progress and deciding what is best. How much should I share? I don't want to villainize her, but I also think that her not speaking at all about the villainization of me and Kail is the problem on this whole thing is really weighing very heavily on me. And I think that I wanted people to hear your perspective because people do also know about the beef between you and Vee.
And it simply was business beef. Like there was no personal beef with Vee. I didn't know enough about Vee to have personal issues. I had issues when it came to business and making it feel like it was copy paste. Like you didn't come up with a new idea. Like you're not rewriting it was a rewrite of a novel is what it felt like. And so I did have an issue with that. And I will be clear that I had an issue with that. I also wanted to be clear, we have basically been called frauds because we all did Ohio together.
The Ohio live show was a prime example of us being friendly and not friends. Vee and I don't hang out outside of the podcast. We didn't really have until the last year and a half. And that was like strictly us not seeing eye to eye on co-parenting things between Joe and myself, and then her involvement or lack thereof, or, that just to clarify, because people love to twist and run. Vee and I also did not agree. We didn't see eye to eye on how to get to Ohio and how to pay for Ohio. And we didn't see eye to eye on anything. She was also, I heard through the grapevine, very upset that she didn't want to be in Ohio. She made it explicitly clear that she did not want to be in Ohio. She wanted the Philly show so that she didn't have to pay to go to Ohio. And a smack in the face, the sense of entitlement was very upsetting to learn that you want to do these live shows, but you don't want to spend the money. You don't want to spend the money to do them. But so long as they're on my dime, it's okay. But you wanted the Philly show so that you didn't have to travel. You absolutely did not want to be in Ohio.
So this is another part where, she just finished saying she doesn't want to villainize Vee after villainizing Vee throughout this entire hour. She says she hates being portrayed as a villain. Meanwhile, the intro to the Barely Famous podcast is It's Your Fave Villain, Kail Lowry, which I will play for you at the end of this when we finish. It's only got about 15 minutes left. And lastly, we villainize Vee again by saying, hey, she didn't want to pay for a live tour that I organized and wanted to do as myself. Listen, this is a tour that Kail organized as the Kail Tour. It's called Barely Effing Touring because it is for the podcast that Kail runs on her own. So to me, it makes perfect sense that Vee is someone who is not associated with this tour. It's not the Barely Famous, it's not the Baby Mamas tour. It makes sense to me personally that Vee would go, okay, this is your tour. You're only having me for one stop. Why not let it be a stop that is the most convenient for me, where I do not have to go out of pocket to support you in your dream? You know what I mean? Because Kail's viewers or her audience or whatever would have loved an impromptu baby mama moment. That is her most popular podcast. She needed for Vee to pop up there, just like she needed for Lindsay to pop up there. And the fact that she didn't want to pay for it, and she's calling Vee entitled for not wanting to pay out of pocket, to me, it's kind of like, girl, if you wanted Vee there and you wanted her to pay, I think you could have launched this as the Baby Mamas tour, because as far as I'm aware, the branding was very clear that this is Kail's tour. So if it's not Vee's tour as well, then why should Vee come out of pocket to show up? If anything, should you not be paying an appearance fee? I'm just saying.
You're pissed off that I didn't invite you to the Philly show.
I went to Ohio on my birthday.
And here comes Lindsay.
On my own time. Because you were starting something new and I wanted to be there to support. In fairness, I had no idea I was going on stage. I just rolled with it. Mm-hmm. Vee pulled me up there.
Mm-hmm. She was not blindsided, though, in any way, shape, or form. She was, I would say, surprised. Because at that point, there was no beef. At that point, the business beef between y'all had subsided and y'all were cool. Mm-hmm. And so she wasn't blindsided, I think, at all, that I'm aware of. I knew you were there, but it was a surprise to me, but I knew before you got pulled up on stage. Mm-hmm. And so, but none of it wasn't like a blindsided in a bad way. Y'all were already cool.
Yeah, and it wasn't to be like intentional to take spotlight off of anybody.
No,
like
I don't think Vee ever thought that, though.
I just want to clear it up for anybody who's listening that like that was not the intention at all. It was my birthday. It was the start of Kail touring. I wanted to be there. I thought it would be fun. There was no longer beef between Vee and I. It would be a great time for us to be able to see each other in person. It was a great time.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
I loved Ohio.
Yeah. No, I loved Ohio as a whole. I didn't. I was tired, but I didn't go out with you guys. You and Vee hung out outside of like whatever, and like that's fine. The beef had subsided for so long, but I think we never really were. Again, we weren't transparent about the beef from the beginning, and so people have speculated that y'all still had beef and y'all didn't. And so she wasn't blindsided in a bad way. She was surprised, I feel like, in a good way.
And I thought I was throwing everybody off because I was posting like I was going to Vegas and I was really in Ohio. So obviously I'm not the national bamboozler that I think that I am.
Some people really had no idea.
No, a lot of people knew.
Can we get merch that says National Bamboozler? Because you posted that on your Instagram and it's lived rent free in my head ever since.
We actually are national bamboozlers sometimes.
Yeah. I feel like truly, if I'm being fully transparent, because y'all are making fun of me for saying that because of the pregnancy stuff, like, oh, were you fully transparent when you didn't tell your pregnancies? They're very different. But in full transparency, I feel like Vee has been the national bamboozler because people really think that we both, collectively, both of us, I can't solely place the blame on her. Wow. We have presented her and our co-parenting dynamic in a way that is not accurate. But I only know that now. I didn't know that in the midst of it too. So like, I also want to speak to that is like, when we were out here presenting us as co-parents and
lying in the street.
So another attack on Vee, a parting attack. There's 10 minutes left in the podcast, and Kail just out of the blue says, I feel like Vee is a national bamboozler because we were, misrepresenting our co-parenting relationship. Then why is Vee the national bamboozler? Why wouldn't you say, I think Vee and I, at least to soften the blow? But here you go, attacking the girl who is not even here to defend herself. Whew. This podcast episode, you guys, has truly been something. She is burning that bridge. You wouldn't even think that they were family. At the end of the day, this is Isaac's stepmom who has been in his life his entire life, minus the first couple of months. Like, she's a huge, important part of Isaac's life. And this is the way that Kail chooses to speak about her on a podcast. Just because she's upset that Vee is not as aggressive and hostile as she is, in that final Baby Mama's No Drama episode. All of this because of that, because Kail received comments in regards to the way in which she spoke. She's like, wow, people hate the way I spoke. This is Vee's fault. Woo. Like I said, 10 minutes left. Let's see what else she's got going.
And like, I don't like that.
But we weren't doing, like, we thought we were something we weren't. It's kind of like my relationship with Chris, where I was in a relationship with him and he wasn't in a relationship with me. Like, I thought that it was something it wasn't. I think we both thought it was something it wasn't.
No, I think that you guys were trying to make fetch happen and it like just never was happening. And then it came to a head.
See, Lindsay is so mean. She is really relishing in this opportunity. You're trying to make fetch happen. They did make fetch happen and they made fetch better than your coffee fetch. Okay?
Now it's all done. I just want to be very clear that I don't have any beef with Vee. I wish her well. I hope that she continues vibing. I don't know how that will all transpire. I hope the best for business, but also individually y'all's personal lives. And if y'all can't get along, then you truly do need to cleave away from each other and move on so that you can both be successful in your own way, whatever that looks like. And you guys do need to remember that she's still involved in a co-parenting situation that you are in. And it's just disheartening. I wanted to speak a little bit on the fact that as much as I hated the idea of baby mamas when I found out about it, I was a soldier trying to save that business.
Yeah. You trying to save baby mamas. And you almost had me. Mm-hmm. I will say that. Lindsay but you know what? I think from a contractual and business company standpoint, other people recognized changes that needed to be made before all of this personal stuff was going on in terms of the dynamic of the show, the energy on the show, the content of the show was severely lacking.
Which was kind of my point. My idea behind Baby Mama's kind of falling apart in that process because it was like over what felt like a fucking year, but it was really like a week. I was like, why can't you guys just be authentic, go on there and say, we cannot talk about this. We have not talked about this for a long time. Let's rebrand the entire show. Let's come up with a completely new concept and still be able to work together. And I think that I actually had both of you for a small period of time.
Oh, did you say this to her too?
Yeah. I said it to her too.
And what did she say?
That she would be willing to like make changes, but you guys had to have mutual respect. And I think that, and you felt that way as well, that there needed to be mutual respect. And, sometimes respect looks very different for all people that are involved. And so the respect that you could give her, she might not have been willing to receive it. And the respect she could give you, you might not have been willing to receive it. Mm-hmm. And so I still wish it wasn't over. And I still wish that you guys did something different. But I also want to speak on the fact that Becky should not be getting hate for stepping in to do a new project that had absolutely nothing to do with the fallout of baby mamas. It is my opinion at the point that Kail and Becky came back together and started rekindling a friendship that was a longtime friendship that went through a period of brokenness. You and Becky were going to do a podcast before Baby Mamas ever came about. And that was something that you were transparent with me about. And I just hope for the people who are listening to this, who support Coffee Combos, who listen to Barely Famous, who listen to Southern Tea and all other shows that are on Killer, that just because Baby Mamas ended does not mean that there cannot be great content for the people who are subscribed to that feed. And I think they're going to be very surprised at what you and Becky have planned. And I'm excited to see it. And I hope that people can give grace where grace should be given. And Becky should not be targeted in any way. It is not a replacement of a co-host. Baby Mamas ended. That show is gone. And all of those assets were turned over to Kail, rightfully so.
Willingly. I also would like to say.
So there you go. Rightfully so. That felt a little snippety. What do you mean rightfully so? The Baby Mamas was Vee's brainchild. So what do you mean rightfully so that the intellectual property was handed over to Kail? And second of all, how interesting is it that you go, oh, let's have some grace for Becky. They've got great things coming. When this entire hour and a bit, you guys have been complaining about Vee for coming and launching a podcast with Kail, how she was using Kail by doing that, and how she didn't have her own following, and how we only know her because of Kail. Then who is Becky? What about Becky? Like, why do we have to have this like open heart, open mind, grace for Becky that we are not supposed to have for Vee? Because this entire hour and a bit, you guys have been trying to tell us to hate Vee and that she's a terrible person and whatnot.
That I do think that I brought most of that following to Baby Mamas. And so
it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, Vee created Baby Mamas. And okay, maybe you brought some following, but Vee made it, Vee also being there, because of course, Kail being there helped with the success, of course, but Vee also helped. That was so unique to have two, the baby mama and the stepmom together on a podcast. That was a unique thing that Vee came up with. And like I said, Kail, you and what's this girl's name? It's not Lauren, is it? You and Lindsay both had followers. And you launched a podcast together, and it still was not as successful as the podcast that Vee came up with. Give her flowers for that. Thank her for that. And, the podcast that you run alone, you got all that following, you got all the control, and it's your least successful one. So stop it, please.
To say that she built 50% of it and Becky is capitalizing off of something that Vee built 50% of is not fair to say.
So if you come up with something, you get someone else to do it with you. Did you not build 50% of it? In fact, she built 100% of it. She created the thing. She created the concept. She created the name. And now you're trying to tell me that she's not responsible for any of this?
I do not agree with that. I don't think that it was 50-50 across Vee and I's business. She got 50% of the profit, but she did not bring 50% to the table. And so there are very different things.
Wow.
And I agree with you. I don't think that. And I also don't like that Alessandra is being pulled into it either, because prior to all of this, Alessandra has been working for us for 3 years. And her and Vee had a private conversation about her working for Killer before all of this transpired. So I also don't want her to be brought into this, because that's also not fair. And, Vee and Lindsay have no beef as far as I'm aware. Becky and Vee have no beef as far as I'm aware. And Alessandra and Vee are still friends. I do see a world where I can work through my resentment and my feelings, and I absolutely will be addressing this in therapy as soon as I get back home, because this is something that is consuming me.
Hopefully with a new therapist.
I'm never going to say that ever again after this episode, but in all actuality and in truth, this is consuming me. I think about it every single day, not even just a little bit of the day, but it's taking up big portions of my day, and I need to work through I need to work through this in therapy. And I say all that to say that I do think that there is a world where Vee and I can still work together in a capacity that Killer supports Vibin. I support Vibin, I support Alessandra and Vee individually, but I do think that there needs to be at some point a conversation about, I think it needs to be acknowledged by Vee so that she understands where I'm coming from. And I just don't think, because we haven't had all of the things that I've said to her she hasn't ever really said anything back.
And I think sometimes people...
And you know what else I noticed? Not once have I heard Kail thank Vee for coming up with the concept of baby mamas. Not once. That podcast got her a lot of legitimacy and recognition in the podcasting world, Kail. And not only that, but it serves as a launching pad. So why can't you say thank you for signing off so easily, 50% to me? Thank you for handing over the control of the feed and of the social media pages so that I could go ahead and launch this next venture. Thank you for being so easy to deal with in the dissolution of our podcast. There's not a single thank you. She wants all the thank yous in the world from Vee, but she offers not one single thank you. And here she talks about, I'm going to therapy. Sis, it's been almost a decade and you are still as bad as ever. I'm sorry, but you are still, your spirit is still as wicked as ever. You are still that same petty Betty. It is time to fire your therapist. It is time to seek a new one because you're wasting your time and money over there.
Process things very differently, and maybe she does not know what to say or how to say it. Have you ever been at just like a loss for words? Mm-hmm. And I think that might be what she might be experiencing, and I don't want to speak for her.
Well, she has disagreed with a lot, but never really given her position, or it's like, it's sort of like when someone has a problem with every single thing being done or said, but comes up with no solutions. It's like, I'm going to fight you on every single one of these things, but I'm not offering any solutions and I'm not offering any middle ground. Mm-hmm. So that's where we're at. And I do think that there is a world where we could work together in a way that I'm helping Vibe in. But I just think that right now,
I don't think Vibing is going to stay on the Killer Network. I think Vee is probably working on getting the hell out of that right now because it makes no sense to stay under Kail with this kind of animosity. This is your podcast network. The person who owns your podcast network launching an entire episode just to talk crap about you and bring things up from a decade ago about you. Like, Vee, you got to get out of here. Do you know you have 30 minutes? Yes, 30 minutes, girl.
Space, and I absolutely need to work through this in therapy.
I also just want to say, as far as people saying that, and I've seen comments, people saying that the subscribership for baby mamas was robbed by a new podcast. That is absolutely not true. And people have to understand that Kail and Vee made a collective decision to end a business very abruptly with contracts that are in place. And there's a lot of back end things that people do not see in podcasting. And I think that grace needs to very much be given there. There also was an entire Facebook group that was created for that show, and everything was turned over and will be turned over to Karma and Chaos. And you're moving forward in the best way that you know how. And you have also personally said to me that you are perfectly fine being able to address what you need to address in therapy and support Vibin on Killer.
100%.
Well, I think that some people just choose to be angry at anything that they can be angry about. It's kind of like we said earlier in this episode, that if someone is committed to hating you, there is
the irony, because Kail is choosing to be angry at Vee for the way that she is publicly received. The irony, you guys.
You could go out and hang a fucking moon. It's not going to change their perspective about you because their commitment is to hating you.
I found a quote sort of recently that really just put me in my feels. And so I'm going to read it to end this episode. Y'all go subscribe to The Southern Tea, also to Vibe and Kind of Thrive In, and Coffee Combos airs every Thursday. Patreon has the visuals of all of these episodes. This says, create the villain, enable the villain, praise the villain, then punish the villain for being a villain.
Absolutely love that. As Kail says many times in this episode, full transparency. We are going into 2025 fully transparent. For those of you who listen to Coffee Combos, I will be discussing next Thursday the actual truth behind my co-parenting situation and my sex life with my ex-husband. So if you guys would like to listen, that will be next Thursday, wherever you get your pods.
Okay, now let's go. Kail, this entire thing has been like, I'm being treated like the villain. I don't want to be the villain. I don't want to be the villain. I don't want to be the villain. She reads that poem about villains. Let's listen to how she introduces the Barely Famous podcast, shall we?
With the $5 meal deal, hear that? It could be the same content. And
it's your fave villain, Kail Lowry, and you're listening.
There you go. There you go. Anyway, guys, this has gone on far too long. Thank you so much for joining me on this stream. It has been wonderful being able to share the episode with you in its entirety. I really do think it will eventually be deleted because it was gone. It went way too far. I hope Vee fights back. I hope her husband fights back. Not in the terms of like the public mudslinging, but behind the scenes, telling Kail it's not okay to speak that way about her on a podcast. It really wasn't. It was a very, 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 it was in very poor taste, in my opinion. All of this vitriol against Vee just because of the way random people on the internet are speaking about Kail.